A couple of things that need to be stated, just for those of you that have shown up a little late and weren't in the auction room. The winner of the 2015 AIA Michigan Gold Medal is Victor Soroki. So Victor, congratulations, and he has the commemorative fake medal. Yeah, you're going to put it on for me again? Put it on for the audience and model it a little bit, Victor. And it's a very distinguished honor, and certainly one that's very well deserved by Victor. And he will get an actual better looking medal in June. Also, I just want to take this time to reflect on someone that's been very important to our school. And I want to reflect on it because he is the underwriter of our lecture series this year and passed away last week and has been so meaningful to us, and that's A. Alfred Taubman. And I just want to take a little time to remember him right now and his importance to Michigan, to Detroit, and to Lawrence Technological University, which he did attend for a year, and he was very loyal to us. And we have now 2 buildings with his name on it here on campus, plus a lecture series, which this is the concluding lecture tonight. And then the third thing is to introduce Samantha to come forward and talk a little bit about the AIAS auction, so that you all, if you showed up late, you have to go back to it and bid on things, and she'll tell you why.
Yes. So my name is Sam, and I'm with AIAS, and if you don't know, that's the American Institute of Architecture Students, an architecture organization here. And we are providing the auction tonight in order to fundraise for Free and by Design, which is within our AIAS program, and it's in order to aid and help for people in need. We have a projector going of a project that we have just been working on with a couple from Bulgaria, and we had worked on their bathroom with them. So I would just like to welcome you guys and hope that you can come back to the auction after the lecture and continue on bidding.
Thank you, Samantha. And there are some terrific items there. If you have some money, Tom Main of Morphosis sent us an original artwork of his, and so if any of you are art collectors, that thing will be worth some money at some point in the future. We have a beautifully signed monograph by Lord Norman Foster, who personally signed it and sent it to us. He was visiting here a few months ago, and he came to see Affleck House, and I asked him for a monograph, and he sent it. And we have just shop architects monograph signed by the principals of the firm. Number of things. I think the main dinners are gone, but there's a lot of, we like to eat, what can I say? All the dinners are gone. There may be a couple of places on one of them, but the auction serves a really good purpose, and we hope that you're generous with your vision for this auction. And without further ado, are we up and running? We were up and running a minute ago.
Yes, we were.
Okay. And are we now up and running?
We will be.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna ask Ralph Nelson to come forward, and whether you're running or not, we're going to introduce you. And so, without further ado, let me introduce Ralph Nelson, who will introduce our speakers.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. So I'm Ralph Nelson, Associate Professor in the College of Architecture. I'm very pleased to introduce my brother, Diogo Bernet, and my sister, Cristina Verissimo. I think Verissimo in Portuguese means truth, and I think Bernet means beauty, right? So truth and beauty, you got them both covered? I don't know. Does Bernet have a meaning? No? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, let's just say it's beauty.
It's pure beauty.
Pure beauty. So I first met them on the streets of Lisbon about a decade ago, and we've been fast family and friends since. They're both extraordinarily gifted architects and gifted educators, and they've committed their life to doing both, and they do both of them very well. But mostly they're just wonderful people. They have an incredible joy and passion for life, and I think that comes through in their teaching and especially their work. And I'm really happy that they have been able to join us for a few days during Design Week, and I really look forward to seeing their work and hearing from them. So please give them a warm welcome.
Good evening. I'm waiting for my computer to say hi to me again. And so I'd like to first on behalf of Christina and me, to thank all of you for this kind invitation. Thanks, Ralph, Scott, that I met literally in the streets of Toronto. I want to thank also Martin for the amazing time we had yesterday, and especially today with Peter and Craig. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the amazing day we had today. Both, and Janice, who very kindly took us today to see the Affleck House and the Cranbrook campus. So we are glad to inform you guys that we've made it through the campus. And it's been quite a day I have to say, personally, I feel very overwhelmed by what we saw today. There's an incredible example of how I'm trying to do two things at the same time. How architecture and landscape are very much intertwined with each other, and how urban design scales, detail, and materials are brought together, both in the Affleck as well as in the several buildings and landscapes we saw at Cranbrook. So yeah, go on. As I'm trying to do this.
I want to thank also. I also want to say that this afternoon we spent it with our masters, and we feel like, what can we say to them that they can see Frank Lloyd Wright and Sardinen every day? So please be gentle with us, because after what we saw today was really overwhelming, and it was a lesson in architecture. So you guys are very lucky to have all these people around you. Learn from them. So it's been quite an afternoon, and thank you. So are we ready? Getting there. I can also tell you that we decided to choose a topic for this lecture, which is public realm. We're going to go through some of our designs talking on that topic. Some of them, in some designs, we're going to stay there a little longer, also to engage with other things such as process of how do we design. But most of the projects we're going to show you and the buildings we're going to show you are going to be really on the topic we're trying to develop, which is the public realm. So that's, Diogo is going to try to put us on the screen. Não está dada.
It's getting there.
Okay.
Okay, good. So we're going to talk a little bit about our interests in our work, how something will happen after the rainbow. There's always some hope at the end of the rainbow. But we're going to show some work that we've been doing both as teachers, as architects, and as Ralph mentioned, people who try to enjoy their work and as much as possible. See if this is going anywhere now. There's the PC option.
You might use your reading today, I forgot to mention where you were educated. Maybe you want to talk about.
All right. So yeah, go on.
Okay, so we both start our education in architecture in Portugal. Myself, I was one of the students in the School of Oporto. I don't know if you know the school. Is been bringing up a lot of architects that you might recognize, such as Cisa Vieira and Soto de Moura. Both of them were Pritzker Prize, and I was really fortunate to be one of the students of Cisa's teacher. So that was quite overwhelming for me. And then I moved to the School of Lisbon, which shared at the time totally different ways of teaching. So again, another overwhelming experience, totally different than the School of Oporto. Diogo was you want to talk?
I'm a Lisbon boy. I've lived in the city of Lisbon most of my life. I graduated from the Faculty of Architecture at Lisbon University. Then I did my post-professional master's degree in History of Modern Architecture at the Barnsley School of Architecture, UCL, University College London, with Adrian Forty, who was one of the coordinators of the master's program. And I've watched the transformation that Bartlett went through when Peter Cook joined the school and became the new head of the school. And it was quite something to watch. And then we moved to Macau, in the Far East. Macau is used to be a Portuguese territory or Chinese territory, considered to be officially a Chinese territory under the management of the Portuguese government. And worked with Manuel Vicente, who's a Portuguese architect who studied with Loic Kahn, and that was something that really changed my life. And let's say one of the joys and the intensities of designing and building and watching how much we can learn when people use our buildings really comes from our experiences back then. And then I started teaching in the States. I met Rolf in 2002 in the streets of Minnesota, Minneapolis as well, and taught in Dallas for a semester, where I met Bill Brinken, somewhat familiar to some of us. And I am currently teaching at Dalhousie School of Architecture since 2012. Christina is a professor of practice at that school. And as I'm trying to open this wonderful file, I'm also the director of the School of Architecture since we moved to Nova Scotia. We have an office in Lisbon. The office has existed since 2000, roughly 2000. Christina also did a master's degree at the GSD, the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University, between 2000 and 2002. And the office really focuses most of the work in public design competitions where we submit design work anonymously, and it's basically government jobs, government buildings for small communities. And we have been very, very lucky to do 15 or 20 and win one. It's like playing a little bit of the lottery, but that's how things usually work. And we're going to show you then 7 projects. Some of them have been built. Okay, I was pressing the wrong button, of course. Mainly in Portugal. We've mainly have done design and constructed buildings in Portugal. We've lived in several places, and we moved back to Portugal in '98, and we lived in Portugal between '98 and 2012. The office is still up and running. We are very fortunate to have wonderful people working with us for quite some time. So all of them were our students, and so we have this ongoing collaboration across the Atlantic between people with whom we've been working for more than 10 years. So there's a sense of familiarity and complicity in the way we've kind of worked together. All right, I think we're done.
Yeah, here.
Okay. Are we? Just take this out. See.
It might not work with the Mac.
It does work with the Mac.
Oh, but anyway.
It should.
No, okay, I'll move the slides.
Okay. Anyway, so, oh yes. Okay, So I need to walk a bit, so bear with me. So, as we are very committed to, I have to say something I mentioned to Craig and Peter today. When we were at Cranbrook, one of the feelings that I had was, and we were having lunch in one of the halls, and this is us in 2015 enjoying a meal, cooked with great love and care, I'm quite sure, for 1,000 students who have lunch in those dining halls. But, if you look at the floors, the walls, the ceiling, the landscape, we're actually having a good time, a great time together in a building that one of the key things it's telling us is this was done at a time that those who were engaged with the design and the work deeply loved building buildings for people to use. There's a sense of profound love and care for how these processes are taking place. So, we do believe that architecture is about making place and making place spaces that give you a sense of place. We also believe that an act of design is also an act of playing with geometry and playing with forms and shapes and materials that gives us a sense of belonging. Also, strongly believe that most of the work we do is related to communities, to how people live. As much as we also profoundly believe that architecture is a vehicle for change, is not necessarily a vehicle that will change people or people's lives, but is a very powerful discipline in a way it can set up a series of contributions that can find ways for people's lives to be improved. So it's also deeply connected to everyday life, to other disciplines. So it's wonderful in that sense because it has a very precise disciplinary body, but it also feeds from all kinds of other areas. And this is a view of of Lisbon, very close to our office. So how do these ideas are developed? Throughout many years, architects not only drew or sketched or built. Architecture is very much perceived or portrayed or communicated through ideas that are put in writing or in drawings. Ideas that combine how history and contemporary issues can be connected, and how also can be provocative for what's coming next. So not only ways of reading current developments, but also opening readings for different kinds of developments, or again, very much profound ways of connecting ourselves to where we are. So how do we study architecture? I know there's a gentleman here at the center that has generated a lot of recent polemic, but what I like about this picture is that we just a person engaged with others discussing our work, and this is mainly what we do every day. It is going through the drawings that we are very much involved with and how we communicate with others. That's how things evolve in architecture. But also, how do we then experience our designs? This idea that we've designed something but is going to the site and learning from what the site is also teaching us, that is quite important. And again, this images is an image that I appreciate a lot because you can see the community for which Le Corbusier is designing La Tourette, looking at him and engaging him in a conversation from very different points of views. And then again, how discussions are carried through has understanding that design is about sharing ideas, not owning ideas. So we're also interested in how these things are taking place. And we've been brought up very much with this idea that we work with someone who's going to become a mentor. These moments of loneliness are important for us to reflect and to think profoundly. And these moments where we are very much engaged in the work are crucial moments in our lives. But the way we are learning now is very, very different. This is a photograph of one of our long traditional design and build free labs that the Dalhousie School of Architecture has been running for the last 20-some years. So this is a group of students designing a building with a faculty member, and we're all learning. And learning is taking place at the same time as we are designing and making a building. And so this engagement between us is now very, very, very different. But we also believe that architecture design cannot happen without any research. So although I think there's too much light in these slides, but this is a group of students looking at the kitchen, at the unité d'habitation, and looking at the materials of the kitchen and how the kitchen is organized. And here is a group of students looking at the bedroom in the sanatorium by Alto, and details like the height of that window that allows someone laying down in bed to look out towards the view. So this idea that we have so much to learn from each other, that architecture is like a big family, and by researching someone else's work, we may have better shots at being more creative and more inventive. But I also know that the design process is never linear, and is something that we also have to reconcile with many different forces and almost unknown and open pathways. So we're also interested in taking our work in as much as possible very open ways. So these are examples of one of the things that I, as a director of the school, am trying to push, which is students' record of their work through a portfolio where they are mapping the artists' or architects' work with their sketchbooks. And these are things they're looking at. This is from a comics book. As they are developing their projects, looking at also sculpture, and there's a notebook page with a bit of poetry as well. So this idea that we are not, although we have a very precise disciplinary body, but it's not an enclosed, autistic, enclosed disciplinary way of working. And how, looking at structure, looking at bones, and understanding how the different rhythms, and how in between every single disc there are soft tissues that are elements that link us to how we experience certain programs in space. How do we study our bodies? I mean, the way the body inhabits space is almost like the first fundamental thing we have to learn from. So these are examples of first-year students where we're trying to understand how buildings are not only organized, but how they are inhabited. Buildings are part of our everyday lives. And how what we do is also achieved or searched through a series of continuous errors. And by having this mode of work where we learn from our mistakes, so we're trying to make mistakes again and again and again, is one of the ways of one of the important ways for us to salvage work. So Christina will continue.
Can you hear me, or do I need the other microphone? Can you hear me? Okay. Oh, you've been recording, so you can hear from here. Okay, so just to give you a little bit understanding of where is our office. So you are over here, we are over there. And it's a very tiny country, believe me, with a very strong Mediterranean kind of feeling, although we're not sharing the Mediterranean, we're sharing the Atlantic. And the Atlantic is very rough on the other side. Big waves. The coast is really embracing that rough sea, and you see, like, if the land, the connection between the land and the sea is this very hard place where you see like a section through the earth, or with all these sediments of geographic sediments, that limit is it's where we engage with. So Lisbon and our culture is engaging also with these cultural sediments. We have underneath Lisbon, this is still there, is a Roman city that you can visit underground. But you also have ruins of moments in our history, such as the earthquake, where we kept buildings like this and they're part of our daily life. But also this kind of stereotomic way that we understand the material, something that is really ground. It comes from earth. It's part of our culture. So Lisbon is this very dense urban fabric with a lot of things going on at the same time. The topography is really important. We can't imagine a building without understanding what is connection to the ground. And then again is the light, is this very intense light that you feel like you almost look for the shadow instead of the light, because the light is so intense. So you have this need of a filter that kind of engages with this density. So again, talking about density, this is an aerial view of the city, and what you see, and this is a model just with white, is what is not built. So basically the leftover spaces that are not built are mainly the streets and the squares, or sometimes one or other garden in the middle of the city fabric. So we live constantly with this connection with the water, but also the connection with the density of the urban fabric. And again, you see all these sediments of things happening, and again, because the city deals with topography, you have all this possibility of views that are in a way overwhelmed, because it's a very old city, but at the same time it looks a little bit disorganized because all these things happen through time. Now our office is really on this place, so we live daily with this experience. And the office is not a very large office. Most of the people that we work with are our ex-students, so are people that we really work for a long time together, and the office is a very collaborative experience. We share a lot in the meetings, possibilities of how does the work developed. If it's need to build a model, we're there to build a model because it's a very small office, and we still believe in research. This is something that we are interested recently. We are testing a screen, a light screen, and these are the samples that Diogo brought last time he was in Lisbon, so that we could choose which one would we like to have the most. And then we do a lot of competitions. As you know, in Europe, most of the buildings, which are public buildings, they come through competition. So actually the buildings we're going to show you were, most of them, competitions that we win. But this is an example of how do you submit your work to people that should not know your name. So in this case, we submitted 4 panels with images, diagrams, and a model. And this is how they select our work, and we got a first award. So we're going to build this in the future. And of course we celebrate, and this is a situation where we just knew, we find out about this last competition, and people over there, they just send us an image, and we were on the phone with Tiago, which is our partner. So is an opportunity to have people celebrating, and of course Skype makes a lot of difference because every day we talk to them. Okay, so pass to Diogo now.
Okay. Turn this on.
It's on.
No, it's on now. So an interesting thing that we've also learned about architecture is that, almost as John Cage once mentioned, there are 10 rules about for students and architect and professors. And the last comment he made about the 10th rule is to break all the rules. But we've one of the things we've been mainly thought about is that in architecture, whenever there's a valid point of view, its opposite can be quite valid as well. So this is a series of themes that we've found here and then embedded in our work, but they are not aligned in any particular way, but those are things that either are bugging us, structuring us, messing us up. But those are just the way we've kind of written them. Those are things that we are always looking at. Validation and the kind of anti-validation. So what are we interested in? We are mainly always looking at how people can experience space. How do we experience space, and how we can use flow through space and stay in a given space. So most times we're very much interested in working through a building through a section. So thinking sectionally is quite important for us. And so this series of images, it just talks about how, from a diagrammatic point of view, we are interested in buildings that are opened up to the landscape. This is a little village in the middle of Portugal, and here what we can see is that the public spaces are, as the rooms are so small, the squares become living rooms in the city. So a square is a room for people to gather. And I do apologize to Peter for this image. And this is Versailles with not as good resolution as it should have, but this is also another strong belief we have, and I mentioned this before, is that we work with geometries, and that's a very distinct way of intervening in the landscape through the act of designing with the landscape. But we're also interested in how do we question the ground floor, how buildings establish a kind of a ground condition, and how in this case there's this notion of the displacement of the ground condition by providing public space in different locations in a given building. And in this case, the fact that we circulate along the facade in front of the square here binds together the program, the circulation flow of people in the building, and it's the urbanity of this very strange building that was built in 1972. So examples like how the ground is considered, and here in the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation's headquarters in Hong Kong, what's very interesting is there's almost no program on the ground floor, only the escalators. And knowing how expensive land is in Hong Kong, it's quite remarkable that this ground floor is occupiable by anyone at any time to do almost anything. And how this is a Caixa Forum by Herzog Muron, this is a library by Caesar, but this idea of how the body flows from the city to the building is quite important in our work. So I apologize to Ralph, you may have seen some of this work, but so this, we're going to show now some projects. The first, all these you'll see are mainly design competitions. This is a small town about 30 miles north of Lisbon. The town has about 15,000 inhabitants, and the county has about 25,000 inhabitants. And as you can see, this is like a national, like Mile 7 or Mile 8, but this is a national road, and it goes across the town center. A very important traditional feature in most of these towns in this area is the bullfight ring, which is a very traditional event in Portugal. And in the main square we have the market, the court, the post office, and the town hall. And in this center, so those are the kind of example of a shop, the market, the town hall, and the street where our theater / cultural center was located. So one of the key questions in this building immediately for us was, how do we provide for a building that is quite public, that is aligned in the street, that has quite small buildings, that is facing a very large public space. So there's a sense of dichotomy between the scale of the building, the scale of the program, the scale of its neighbors, and the scale of the space that signifies its program, that is going to be signified by its program. That's the bullfight ring, the post office, the market, the town hall, and the court there. Hasn't given up, has it? No. So we started by playing with circulation, by trying to sketch out how, if we look at the lessons we had learned from the Pompidou Center, for instance, how by choreographing movement, mainly parallel to the facade, we could make the way people move around the building a kind of an urban spectacle. So these are studies about the feasibility of moving up and down, mainly along the facade, as little as possible, deep into the lot. The lot is very limited. It has, I have to say this in meters, 20 by 40. That's 20 meters. That's approximately 70 feet by 140 feet, and you will see, so through these diagrams, you can't see much here, but one can see kind of this idea of opening up the building towards the street and planning circulation along the facade. And I'm going to move to the program, the circulations. And this is what I wanted to show you, which is how the street connects to the lobby, how the main auditorium is lifted up, the small auditorium at the bottom, the stage, the space on the stage. This is exchange rooms. You can see that most of the height of the building is taken by the stage tower, and that's mainly what one can see in the plans now. So this is the ground floor. As you can see, it's kind of as wide as possible, as deep as possible. Those are the stairs that take you to the upper level, to the main auditorium, and those are the stairs that take you down to the small auditorium. And you can see here, those are very big legs. I'll explain this in a minute. As from a structural point of view, the building is cantilevered from this point. So from this point, that way, on one hand, on the left-hand side, as you can see here, this is something like 70 feet cantilevered. This is maybe 80 feet cantilevered there. And so to do this, one can see how the structure is very much fixed at these two thick walls here, and with the help of those two guys over there. So this is a working model, and this is mainly to study the formwork and the shape of these that would allow for the sight lines for the main auditorium to be as clear as possible. I'm very sorry for this image, but one of the things we were interested with this is the role of geometry, as this is a slightly irregular shape, because if you imagine that you have a piece of paper and you bend it that way, and when you bend that way, the circles are different on both ends. And this is a drawing that maps all the circles. And this is not CATIA or anything. This is like AutoCAD 11, but we had to use those files and send them to the formwork fabricator that fabricated all the formwork through those files that had to be very precise in terms of its geometry. Because of the shape and the cantilevered, the concrete is all self-compacting concrete, i.e. it's a very liquid concrete that doesn't need to be vibrated. And what it means is that if there's any joint between any piece of formwork that is not completely sealed, water will go through, and if water goes through, there's sand concentration and different kind of less water concentration there, and it's a mess. So this was highly studied, welded together as one piece. This is 18 tons. I do not know how to translate 18 tons, 18,000 kilos into pounds, but it was heavy.
A little bit.
And because it's pulled by a crane, there's this guy with a string. If he pulls a little bit, this thing will go like that. So it's like walking the dog. And whilst this single piece of formwork had to be taken out as one single piece in one go. So this is one of these days on site that we'll find our spiritual guides and try to pray as much as possible. So you can see the joints of the metal formwork, but this is to provide for this sense of material continuity. And also to provide this sense of continuity between inside and outside, where material travels from both inside and outside. So this idea of the transition between inside and outside was very much something that we were interested in pursuing in this building. And also, the distance between the two gables is about 70 feet. We obviously wanted the concrete surface to have absolutely no surfaces, no sprinklers, no fire alarms, no air condition, nothing, just a pure concrete form. So we have to heavily invest in all the surfaces being provided from these lateral walls. So the lateral walls have this pine, which is very cheap in Portugal, studs that are fixed with simple bolts to wooden structure that allows to hide all the surfaces behind. And we were committed to do something that you and I could unbolt it and get access to any duct if we needed to. So the idea here is that material will provide for this sense of continuity. So we had slate on the floors, concrete on the ceilings and on these walls here, and the pine woods on the lateral walls. So the public space was all done with natural materials. And here I am about 12 feet under the ground floor. Those are people walking along the street. So by playing with voids in and out the building also allow for someone who's in the street to take a peek into, as the kids we just saw, into the building. And also, as we didn't want to have any lighting here, a big question was how are we going to provide enough lighting in this space? So we provided for this big light box that was tested. This is me a few years younger, and with a few other things, and without a few other things as well. But here is how we're testing how many lighting. I mean, this is very cheap lighting features, but how many lightings would we need? 2, 1? And here is 3, and this is testing even as we are designing. So we are in the middle of our design. We're working with the electrical engineer. We have no idea how many lighting features we're going to need. We were interested in continuous lighting, and we were very lucky to have a glass manufacturer and an electrical feature supplier who, after a series of meetings, were kind enough to get together and provide for a little experiment so that we could learn about what it takes to produce this. As in public buildings, if these things aren't measured, aren't specified, you're going to get into trouble later on if the performance of the building does not comply with your client requirements. So here you can see introduction of color right at the moment where we move from the public space to the cloakroom, the cafeteria, or the restrooms. And at the back, all the walls of the stage are yellow, and the floor here is a red cheap rubber. And the intention we had was that even at the back of the stage, we had this big window, could open this backstage to the street so people could walk, and we could have images of the different shows occupying this wall with time.
But it's also the entry to the lower stage.
Yeah, it's the entry to the backstage. Yeah.
It's a service.
So the two auditoriums, one of the main themes was obviously we needed to provide for a very good acoustic sense, but we wanted to play with light, as light was matter, and was matter that was going to be sculptured. So what we have here is a series of gaps that reveal light underneath them. And in the main auditorium, Christina, this was done when Christina was, part of this project was developed when Christina was in the States, and one of the things we did was to visit buildings. And to visit buildings is one of the most important things that we've done all our lives, to learn how other friends and family members of this great architectural family have put things together. And we visited Lowican, British Arts Center, Yale, and he had this auditorium with the walls completely in concrete, and we felt, I mean, if Lowy can do it, we have to do it as well. And so the main auditorium plays with this idea of again, there's a lot of acoustic performance in the ceilings as the walls are all in concrete. And we played also with an interesting thing, as the seats are curved, the beams that support every level are also curved. And by the beams being curved, it means that there's an area that is redundant in terms of structure. And this gap here is where air flows. So what is interesting for us here is that this is just a sketch looking at the drawings from the engineers and looking at how the engineers are designing their sections and identifying the kind of key structural elements, and then how these boxes are identifying the requirement from the mechanical engineer to allow air to go through. So basically, in any auditorium, air should be supplied from the bottom and return is up here. And then when they get built, this is post-tension cables, as you can see here, and you can see those boxes, they seem to be built just with leftovers of foam work from other jobs. So it's interesting to see something that is apparently quite complicated but built in a kind of very clumsy way. And this is what we were aiming at. You also can see that although the theater is quite classic in its shape, there's no threshold, there's no proscenium per se, although there's wing space at the stage, which is one of the most fundamental features in any theater, which is how we provide for privacy to performers. And this is what moves us. How then the building is occupied, lived, enjoyed, and how the joy that we've had through the process comes alive in the way the building is being used. So those are different shots of the stage, but also how then creative people also intervene with great audacity in the public areas of the building. So this is a fashion design show, performing in the staircases, as you can see here, participating in a poem, poetry reading, photograph exhibitions, and a jazz festival. And recently, the manager of the building, this is just an image being projected against the concrete wall, found out that the basement, the low ground floor, is very good for hard rock stuff. So apparently new heavy metal, loud music is being experimented in the lower ground floor. But what for us is fascinating is this is just like artists' interventions onto the building. So to think about the building as being very open for other kinds of usage and performance as well.
Mm-hmm. So people are asking us if all this is competition, what does it drive us? And I think that in that particular case, the theatre, they saw it only as a function of a theater, but we understood that it could go beyond it. So we designed that foyer, that main entrance, as a possibility for exhibitions. So now they use it as a cultural center, and so the building is keep on going through the day and through the night. So is this idea that we try to push the program as further as we can. Now, this is an example of a competition that we're very interested to show you, because even though our topic is the public realm, this is an example of how this is a building within the landscape. And this is right in the top of the country, in this very famous region. I don't know if you heard about the port wine, but this is man-made walls where they have these platforms where they grow the wine. So the landscape is overwhelmed, but has been occupied forever. So these are, Diogo, how old are 12? How old are these?
The engravings are 20 to 30,000 years old.
So it's prehistoric engravings, and they want us to build a museum that really enhances what this area at this time was. And so we look deeply into the landscape, and we realize that there are many features. It's like, how do you embrace this grandity of space? And this is the place that we choose. We could choose a site. And our site was this level platform overlooking this valley in a way. And we were interested about how these man-made walls of this slate material could be an inspiration for our building. And so the building is really coming from the earth, so it's part of the earth, and what it does, it creates a room, which is an outside room, which is a sort of a cloister that in a way organized this museum that it has this quality of framing the view. So we were very interested in this huge landscape to select one point and just give a window to people to overlook, and at the same time to be protected within the winds and the warmth of, it's very hot in there, so we had this water feature running. We had all this glass that connects one side of the museum to the other, and then this wall that embraces people and frame them into the view. So we create a public space. We create this public realm where people would like to be. So that is the museum, and how does it fit within the landscape? In this case, of course, the walls are attached to the ground, but the building is like a wall floating above glass. So it has this metaphoric kind of intervention. This is another building, which is an elderly center very close to Lisbon. And this is another competition we win, and this is a very tough neighborhood. Urbanistically is also not very friendly, it's not this very good sense of place, and it's organized through this geodesic mark, and all the social housing goes around, and they gave us this site that luckily was close to a possible park that after we built the building, the park was done. But the site was a little bit going up this way, and what we decided to do was to put the building against the lower part of the site, against a narrow street, and create a boundary with a garden that would give the sense of enclosure. Now, together with that, we create let's say two buildings that are attached to each other to these sort of corridors or circulation areas. But since the beginning in our sketches, these circulation areas were more than circulation areas. We believe they could be a place for people to gather, such as in the street. So we're bringing the public realm, in this case, to the middle of the building. And so this is a plan showing you that narrow street on the back is from where you enter, and the ground building is organized into the more public space, such as the gathering area, and it's also the place where they eat and they stay. They have here offices, just medical, physiotherapy, and so on. They have the kitchen over here with the laundry and so on. So is mainly on the ground floor where people get together, and these boxes are organizing through by transparent spaces that connect with the back, which is the garden. The garden is surrounded with a wall that gives you this sense of place. You're going to see next. So this is the garden. So the garden is where they have a lot of events. The building creates an arcade so that they have some shade to be when there is very hot, and you have these transparent areas that connect the upper levels with the ground. Now, to this building, we select the tile, which is a material that is very used in Portugal, but at the same time, it has almost zero maintenance because it's a material that lasts for a long time, especially under our climate conditions. So the building organized, this is a section now through this middle area. It organized different levels where we put each family has a small unit which is composed by a small bedroom, a kitchen and a toilet and a living room, and they are repeated through these two buildings that are connected with this middle area. Now, what we did as a key point is this yellow part, which is the infrastructure ducts. And you're going to see by looking at the other images that if you always locate in the middle, this duct, is possible the door to be flipped from one side to the other, so that these circulations are totally different from the floor. So this is the vertical shafts that organize the infrastructures, and you see each floor is different. But because this is low-income housing, we only play a little bit with the corridors, but the infrastructures, which is the most expensive one, are located always on the same place. So this allowed the facade to be totally different, but at the same time, it allows diversity because they are older people, so they would know each floor is different from each other, so they would recognize their floor. So this is an idea of one floor. So the yellow space is the circulation area. It allows them to have pockets where they can talk to each other, and at the same time the voids connect all the floors, so they can be talking from different levels and so on. So if you want to frame on this unit, you would see how does the door goes differently in each floor, and how does the voids are different because of that. The infrastructures are kept, but everything is flipping from one floor to the other. So this is a section through that space showing you the double heights and so on that happen in each floor. We always wanted them to be talking at different levels, and these are what we call the winter gardens, where people with less mobility could overlook the garden and could even be talking to them. And this is an image where you have this continued transparency engaging with the garden that is organized in different levels. And this sense of place is done using the topography, which is how does the walls create that, embrace that garden and connect it to different levels. So these are images of the units. And on the ground floor, we also use slate. Now, this material is leftovers of the quarries, and we bought them in large quantities, and these people, artisans, came and assembled it. So what you see here, even though is stone, is a very cheap material. Portugal doesn't have a lot of natural resources, so we have to use what is possible. And color became for us a material because for us is a cheap material. So we use a lot of color as a contrast between surfaces. The connection within the garden sometimes gets inside. This is the living room where they share. This is them. This picture doesn't show well, but this is the garden, so they are always connected there. And this is the view from the other facade, which is the main facade, that on this side we use the blue. So we also have the contrast between the very cold colors facing the more warm facades and the other side, which is the red. And the middle are these circulation spaces that is organized again with a site and this geodesic mark. Another house, we decided to show you a house in the same place where our theater is. A client decided to give us this commission, and he had a plot really close to the theater, and he really enjoyed the theater, so he wanted us to design the house. Now, the reason why we wanted to show you this, because the topic is again public realm, but this community is a very small community, and they keep the doors open. So we were thinking about how can a house get privacy when the main door is totally open to the outside. So this is the street, and this is the main entrance where they can keep open, but there is this connection with the garden. Again, we play with topography, and we have this very strong volume, which is more heavy, attached to the ground, and then the private spaces of the houses are like a box that floats on top of this more heavy volume. This heavy volume interacts with the ground, so that's why I sculpture the ground in order to organize the levels. There is a staircase that brings people up and down. And so what you see here again is through the use of the slate, we kind of organize one floor that it has a courtyard. Now in this climate, the courtyard is essential because it filters the light. And in this case, because the topography is different, the courtyard also organizes different levels. And it gives you this sense of freshness that you need within the warm parts of the day. Oh gosh, it doesn't see. But this is a view from the entry, and where that person is the garden. So you create a connection through the garden, but yet the privacy is kept aside, because even if the door is open, you will not be seen, only when you're going up and down the staircase, but mainly the house is organized without being seen. So this, we like to show how people use the house. So this is how they use the house. There is a very big room on the back, because he calls the music room, because he loves music. So the house is a very peculiar one, because he has a studio in his house, a music studio in his house. This is the garden, not yet, is now more with gardens and everything. Okay, this is me? Okay. Okay, so another interesting thing is how do we select buildings that already exist, because it's not just building, it's how do you keep on having buildings that have been used forever, and how do you give them a new life? So in this case, this is a town in Alentejo where on a main square there was a monasterium that was already a military headquarters, that was a hospital. So it's a building that has been through many stages, and they wanted to do the town is beautiful with a castle, with these walls. The town is mainly white with the red roofs. So we were interested about keeping this type of traditions and conditions. This town is very famous for its tapestry. And this is an event where the town is totally transformed, because they put all the tapestries on the windows and they celebrate the event. And our building is right on the main square, which is this building over here. So the building had been with a lot of uses, and what we decide to do is how can we engage in part of this building's life by touching very little. So in this case, turning it into a museum where people go in and celebrate what is their culture, what we decide to organize is one main area that became double height, where people get together. The entry, this is the square entry. This was an old chapel that we kept, and this was used through many different things, but it was a large room, so we wanted to keep that as an exhibition room. We also create an extra part, so that is an extension of the building that before was just a courtyard, and this is our new intervention, let's say it. So the building is organized through all these already existing walls that somehow we try to organize it, especially because the levels were totally different. But we decided that our interventions would be creating on the ground floor this very heavy material, which is a local marble that will bring a new identity to the building. And we would talk about the ceilings and the connections between one window, which shows the castle, and the main square. So the transparencies between levels were important to us, and this is the main space that we show you, that I explained. We has the double height, and we even create a sort of a balcony that overlooks from above. So these are images of that. This doesn't show much, but is the images of that big room that we show to exhibitions. Another courtyard that we design, in this case, you have to understand that the building has been through a lot of things, and so in terms of archaeological findings, we did not want to dig a lot, because we would find, it was a hospital in the past, so you can imagine. But this is the chapel, and the chapel as underground, we find out when we were excavating that it still has important archaeological things that should be seen. So this is during construction that the glass floor was added to the church. We also find these frescoes that were kept. And so these are images. Now, another feature which is important was the ceilings. So in the new life of the building, it was all about the floor with the marble, and then the ceilings that organize all these infrastructures, but at the same time create a lot of skylines that allows the building, again, to create a lot of flexibility, such as when you don't want to use them, you will be close to protect the artifacts, but if there is an event, you would open them and you allow people to stay longer, such as, for example, these women that stay there the full day, and because we had to the building these skylines, they managed to work there the full day with a natural light. So it's again, how do we try to the space to be more flexible? This window overlooking the castle is a balcony that we open, and we allow people to go closer. The building was kept with our consultants in terms of color. We've reached the original color of the building. And this is our intervention that, of course, we use the patterns of the tapestry to create a CNC cutting machine with that. Okay, this is me or you? Okay, me. Okay, so this is the school. This is the school that we finished in another competition commission, and to start this, we were very interested about what is it about designing a school? What are the things that children could be interested? So we did a lot of research into these mathematical toys with geometry that, of course, we know a lot of architects were sensitive, that Frederick Froebel developed. And we understand that the children are sensitive to proportions. So it took us a long time to organize. These are architects that were, they even say, Frank Lloyd Wright say, I play with these toys and they changed my life. I became an architect through these mathematical toys. So we look at this and we realize that maybe this idea of playground could be interesting. So it took us a long time to organize what is a classroom, what is a good classroom. So they gave us this chance to do a school that there was already pre-existing buildings. So the school was organized into separated buildings, and through the pads they would go from one building to the other. Now, in terms of conditions, this was not in a very good state in terms of structure, but at the same time the children would get totally wet, and in winter time was very tough for them to stay outdoors because there was not indoor spaces for them to gather. So the idea of the school, first of all, this is the white part, is our site, and these were the existing buildings. So we decided to remove some of the buildings, and others we kept, and we organized the new program, which was twice as big or 3 times as big as the original one, but this time we decided to create one building that could embrace the existing ones, connecting all of them, and turn them into one single building. In the middle, we create a square. And the square, we call it the learning square, is all where the students gather. So the school, it's part of a matrix that organizes all the site, and it creates areas where the landscape engage, the buildings engage with the landscape, because there is a moment where there was a retained wall. And so the existing buildings mold a little bit the landscape and create pockets of where the children can be and connect the old with the new. So the learning square, the learning street, I'm going to show you after. And so this is where the learning square is, the circulations around that area, the connection with the landscape and the topography. And the buildings initially were totally separated, and this is how we start to connect them. So in terms of this, this section is not very good. But anyway, this is a section through there. And what you see is the old buildings start to merge into the new building, and they create spaces that the other ones are very regular grid, but then there are spaces that they are twisted, they have a different shape, and those are the spaces that in terms of sections, they create unusual spaces is where they gather. So we're going through every floor and explaining you the connection with the buildings. This is the existing buildings. And these are the facades. Now, in terms of facades, we create a mold that was a prefabricated concrete. And the way we design it, it allows the light to be shaded, to be protected. Again, we use the color as an indirect light that the students don't see the color, but they can see the color be reflected. And this is how do we study the prefabricated panels so that they could fit into the transport that brings them from the factory to the site. These are some examples, and how they are assembled. So these panels are just 7 different panels, and they all assemble in different rhythms, allowing the classrooms to have natural light, but at the same time, the sun-protected light that it requests. This is the main square that is a construction site at this moment in the picture. These are other prefabricated panels. This exists in the factory as a drainage gutter, and so we use them as a facade element. These are examples to remind us of a simple glass. It needs 7 men to put it together. So we were very concerned about the weight of things, where we had to use the cranes and not. So you see the color to be applied, and you can have situations where you don't see color. This is the main, what we call it the main square, and the other side has a lot of color. So this is the connection with the landscape, and we had a portico. So the building is lifted from the ground, and it has the portico. So here is the indirect color that you don't see, but of course is reflected. And this is the arcade that we saw already, some of the images. So these are the studies for that arcade. We always wanted them to be a playground. So we studied them in order to be able, the children to see it. So this is under construction with concrete. The shapes are getting there. So this is already one example when it's built, and this is the one that is facing, this is the sports where they have play sports. and that is what we call it a square. And this is them engaging. This is the first day of the school open. We didn't say anything, and they start to use this area as a gathering area. These spaces are very comfortable. Some of them you can walk through, some other ones you sit. So it's a very lovely space to be. And again, the color, we use it as a material. And so these are the circulation areas where we embrace with a lot of color. Those are the regular spaces that I told you about. Some of them have light from above. Some others are creating a corridor that allows you to understand where is your classroom in a different color. And this is the staircase. That is a sculpture, is part of the poster. That is a sculpture element that connects levels, different levels. Okay? Oh, okay. So this is the main entry, and we have the use of color in this. Is a multi-purpose hall, and where we designed this curved staircase, all designed in concrete, and these are studies for that staircase that we wanted to be a singular element within the school. This is the staircase getting built. And this is the space. So the staircase connect levels, and that is the main purpose hall. And this is the skylights that cast light in different times of the day, where you have the yellow that brings light to the space. The students use it a lot. This is the interior of that auditorium. And this is a classroom. This is a laboratory that is very, very serene, and where you find it, this is an acoustic ceiling, but the color is very calm, so that the students have a very nice environment. And so this is the main square where they spend the time. This is our last design, and Diogo is going to show. Oh, you don't need, oh, you do. Okay.
All right. So this is competition we won in 2008, and we're still revising the project. And so it's been only 7 years now. The buildings last forever, let's say. We've studied buildings that are meant to last. And the opportunity that we have to engage with clients and to discuss how programs may shape the future of a community is quite important. So this is a medical school, and one of the reasons that this is taking so much time is a simple shift of presidential managerial level at the Faculty of Medicine. So with a new provost, a new dean, the way the program was conceived changed radically. But this is the building has about 140,000 square feet, so it's a very large building, and it's a very compact building. It's in Coimbra. Coimbra is one of the eldest cities in Portugal. It's also one of the eldest universities in Europe. The University of Coimbra was founded around the 1200s, and it's 120 miles north of Lisbon. So that's the medical campus there. The medical campus has this peculiarity that it's close to an hospital, as most are, and it's organized around two streets that are kind of brought together by D squared. So this is the main administration, canteen, students' residence, pharmacy, library. This is an interesting building where they are studying cancer, classrooms, and this is the new building. The building has this interesting corner relationship with the main campus square, but also from a programmatic point of view, the building is a hybrid. It has dentistry, psychology, auditoriums, research labs, and so the building has about 8 different departments in one single roof. So you can imagine 8 different deans, one dean, 8 different heads. It's been quite fun to work with all these people and to learn so much about their needs and their not only their current needs, but also how they project themselves towards the future. Because imagine we won this competition in 2008, it was launched in 2007. We are still debating how present and future can be brought together. So a key feature for us, connecting this program to how people enjoy buildings and how people move, was that the only way we can connect a very compact building is by organizing the voids, kind of the non-programmatic areas of the building. So what we have here is the labs, the most public areas, and the big auditoriums. And here you can see this section and how we kind of extrapolated a void that would bind the whole program together. This may sound great and is a good apparatus for connectivity, but in terms of fire safety, acoustic performance is a nightmare. So, and we're looking at a lot of surfaces, guess what, with exposed concrete. It's a kind of material that we're very, very keen on working with. And so that's also another interesting challenge. So how do we communicate, but how do we allow for privacy and sound to not to travel that much? So what we have here is how this series of different voids have different depth and heights, and how through some of the treatment of the glass we can allow for mainly the sound is produced in the lobby for the main auditoriums to travel mainly to the most public space, as this is open, and not to the kind of lab space because there's this glass here. So what we see here is the square is there. There's the connectivity from the square to the main students. So one of the focus we felt was, since the building has so many different communities, to find spaces where all these different department students could gather was quite important. And if they are given a space where they can gather, so this is a reading area, cafeteria, there's a little esplanade here, which is there because there's a nice woods and nice trees on the other side. This was for us quite a more transparent area and more interesting to work with. So this is the entrance there, that's the main square. We'll walk through to the cafe and to the esplanade to enjoy a little bit of the landscape, the outskirts of this town. And as you can see then on the upper floors, how relentless the program is. So, for instance, we also decided to locate all the faculty offices in those voids and all the research labs where students are working with adequate exposure. And this is the biggest void that connects the two auditoriums. One of the things we learned from the medical profession and the medical sciences, all kinds of conferences are also a great opportunity for manufacturers and labs to connect with professors. So those two auditoriums that you see there are 2 400 people auditoriums. Then we have another 2 here. This one is 150 people. Then we have 275. As they are also conceiving this building as a great hub for all these kinds of events that also bring a lot of revenue to the university. So the university is looking at renting this place as well. So one has to deal with all these issues as one is programming this building, and that's why this space is so big but also so tall. So one of the things we were wondering about is that it would be great whenever there's an event that the hub, of the event travels a little bit. So here I am in my lab, circulation, which is a corridor that is somewhere here on the 2nd floor, which is here, and I'm looking down, and I'm looking at people and an event that is taking place. Thank you.
I'll take some questions.
I would love to take some questions. And
Hi, hello.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, perfect.
We had a good podcast. All right, being that you've been so successful, I guess, with all the competitions, and yet you still have projects that you work on and you have to pay your employees with, how do you know when you actually have something in your hand that's like worth following, and how do you know how to manage your sort of time and or how much time you're willing to invest in that competition?
You want to get to phone? We have to tell you that this is normal in Europe. If you want public work, you have to go through competitions. Now the question is, how do we manage that? Of course, it's all about how you balance the ones that you win with the ones that you don't win. We've been quite fortunate to tell you that we've been winning enough to actually keep the office running. But you have to understand this is never an office to actually make a lot of money. It's an office where we believe research is really important, but at the same time, it gave us an opportunity. The competitions, most of the ones that we didn't win, was never a lost case because we believe that we learn a lot from them. So the way that we do it, and because we're doing it a lot, is we have a team that understands what is the programmatic demands of the competition. We get together as a brainstorming, and we spent the very short time with that competition. Now, this needs to have a very organized team because we know in that short time what everybody can do. And we concentrate the office on that time, on that competition, and everybody works, but we know what everybody can do. So we don't spend, let's say, lost work, we don't spend lost money, we're very efficient, and we gave a response that, as you see, as a result, is most of the time 4 panels, and sometimes a model. So the way of communicating in a competition is key. What do you want to tell these people? How do you tell it? And why are you different from the other teams? So we kind of engaged, like I explained. They gave us a program. How can we push the programs to the point that we say, this can be more than a theater. This could be a cultural center. Let's give them a very nice lobby and explain them that this could be used differently. So our competitions try to bring more than the program, but please be aware that we're not pushing the budget further. Is how do we design within the budget of the competition, but give them more. So I don't know if you want to add.
I just wanted to add 1 or 2 things to try to answer to your question. We never spend more than a month in any competition. We usually start with 1 person that deals with all the bureaucracy of the competition in terms of all the paperwork. The work has to be submitted anonymously, so any small mistake about Joe, Mary, Peter, Paul, and Pen, we're doomed. So we have to be very careful with that. So there's a lot of sheer bureaucracy that we have to control. And then we deal with program. And as most buildings are, for us, I mean, whatever medium scale means, but we usually have sometimes even competitions within the competition for 1 week. So you and I are doing different schemes because Christina is not happy with none of them. And then she will say, I like your t-shirt, but I like these guys' trousers. Right? and then
Method of fashion.
we have to and sometimes it's demanding, but by week number 3, all drawings are done. Week number 3, 4, we're doing final drawings, boards. We rarely have worked with what many years ago we would nickname perspective artists. We like homemade cookies. we do our, the relentless renderings. We try not to Photoshop or photorealistically do them too much, but most times those drawings represent ideas, and only those who've been heavily involved in the discussion of these ideas can do something about it. So in a way, that also requires that we have to have very different skills. We don't have the rendering guy, the program guy, the facade guy, men or women. Everybody needs to do everything. You could see Christina loves to do models, so whenever there's a model to be done, we just have to let her do the models, and that's it. And that's a month of work, and so it varies from one person, two persons. By week number 3, 4, we may have 3, 4 people, but this happened because we've been doing that for many, many, many years, and those now friends with whom we've been working, they've been in the office for more than 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you and me, baby, we're going to get together and have a beer and do something great tomorrow. The work is also developed by a level of intimacy, and the challenge is that we don't get used to each other. Because if you do this, if I do that, we all know what we're talking about. But to keep a level of anxiety in a good Raphael Monel talks about design and anxiety, but in a way that we are continuously being relentless at each other and pushing each other. So that's a month of work. As I said, it takes, if you do get 1 out of 10, you must be very good. If you do 1 out of 15, you're very, very lucky. 15 to 20 is a good outcome. It's financially disastrous, but as Christina mentioned, we're here to just learn how to swim, keep the water close to your nose, and really, really enjoy the work as much as we can. The other thing is, when we work like this with people who were our students, there's almost this feeling of carte blanche. Every project is an open discussion, and no one has any more points because you're older, more experienced than everybody else. We're all equal. So if one of us says something is completely rubbish, everybody else is going to say, "Excuse me?" Right? And so this is also an ethos about the office and how we work together that has been very important. There's no hierarchical relationship. Although if there's a commission, one person is going to be in charge of that project. And that person will do design, project management, team coordination, design team coordination, and consultancy coordination as part of a package. So it can be quite demanding, where you have clients and deadlines and building regulations, everything to handle, and then there's a new competition coming out for whatever program that we've never had before, and that really sounds interesting. Shall we do it? We try to do this without all-nighters. We find it is very important that most of us have families, and we try to avoid having dinner in the office, the usual Boston pizza, whatever equivalent we may have across the Atlantic, order on a Saturday at midnight. So we try to balance as much as possible lives of everybody who's working with us. You don't need my mic.
There is a question over there.
A sec, on my way.
I believe you mentioned that you are designing to a budget too for the competitions. You have some very interesting and very complex shapes. The secondary school, you use 5 panels, but it looks like you use a lot more, which is very interesting. But how do you estimate some of these, keep within a budget with these very complex shapes and designs?
Okay. First of all, yes, budget is important, and the budget for these buildings most of the time is very, very low. Now, Portugal has one incredible skill about concrete. If you give to a worker concrete scaffolding or foam work to do, is not something they're not used to. There are exceptions, though, in the theatre, and the building, the theatre, the main budget was to that cantilever. That's why the other materials are very poor, because we didn't have a big budget. But because we wanted, the secret for that building was it's worthwhile to have a cantilever, because the other opportunity would be all these columns in such a small space, and we want to give them an opportunity of a space that they could use differently. So we had to talk about, is this worthwhile? Where are we going to spend the money for this building? With the approval of the client, so that we can see if it's worthwhile. Now, in terms of the school, the shapes, they were not as hard to do as you might imagine, because we gave them already all the design, so they did it for them. It was very easy to build. So in terms of that, the way that we organize the budget is pretty from the beginning is very well decided. One thing is crucial also that we didn't talk is we set up the team right from the beginning, which means that Diogo was talking about the architectural team, but we start with consultants in many different levels, but also the engineers. So when we go for the competition, when we organize our budget, the engineers, we are going to work with us, so we understand our budget is going to work. So it's crucial for us to have the team since the first day of the competition. So everybody got in from the beginning. So when we submit our budget for the competition, we know what we're submitting. We know our costs up ahead. Important is also that the consultants are also crucial, because in all of them, for example, for the Oldery Center, we had a person that talks about mental diseases and so on that came to the team earlier. We had a color consultant for the school, because the colors, the bright of the colors for the students, this was important. We also have an archaeological guy working, a professor working with us in this building, on that building. So the team is organized from the beginning, including the landscape architects and so on.
So in terms of budget control, we've had situations where the program and the budget don't match. And so we've stated, and this is a risk we've taken. We do a competition, your work is submitted anonymously, you have a cost estimate, and your cost estimate is different from the one that they are predicting. And we've had situations where we lost competitions because of that, and there are situations we've won competitions not only because of that, but also we are very honest about if you think that your average cost of a simple concrete structure is X per square feet, and you've got a client to say is 50% of that, I would say it's your responsibility as an architect to let them know that this is not feasible. Someone estimated something that is completely impossible. And so, and sometimes we talk about 50%. It's not, if you do it with steel, it's going to be cheaper. So there are situations where we have to work, and it's a chance we take. Regarding the budget control, we do work with consultants from day one. As Christina has mentioned, even at competitions, we work with cost consultants that will guide us through the kind of the management of the cost estimate. Even when we do like a basic design, feasibility design kind of stage drawings. We tend to work with a team of engineering consultants that has all the services together. So there's a lot of internal coordination that takes place within one team. So we don't have 8 or 10 different companies working with us. You usually have one that has good engineers for all kinds of services. The other thing that regarding the panels, For the school, we worked with we did consult 3 concrete, prefabricated concrete panels fabricators to get a good price. And we changed the shape of some of the pieces following our work with them. So we're very aggressive in terms of getting those who will make those things on board with us. And sometimes it's a give and take because you want to get the job, but you don't want to release your patent or patented details too early, because this is going, all of this is going out for tender in a public way, right? So you don't pre-select anyone can apply for any contractor that has a license to build these kind of buildings. But it's by working with those who will fabricate things from early on that we can manage costs. Regarding the school, we started with 3 or 4 panels only, and because of the speed of production, when they got the job, they asked us they needed to do like 3 or 4 similar molds. Because what happens is that then when they got the job, they need to do everything, let's say, in 5 months. And you can't do one mold only, because it may be more economic to do the mold, but that sets a pace of production that is very slow. So it's interesting to get to listen to these guys and how they process their work, because they knew that the school had to be built in 1 year. So 1 year means X number of months to produce X number of panels. So you need to combine the shapes, the number of molds, and so that's why we tweaked a little bit with the molds, because we realized that to do 2 the same or 2 different for them is the same. They need to speed up production. So the crucial cost is time, not just the materials.
Yes.
Okay, we can't take many questions, I guess. How are we doing?
I think we ought to go back to the auction.
We should go. Okay, so this is our last question, but please be aware that we're going to be here tomorrow, so you can come to us.
So I observed the use of accent colors in you guys' structures a lot. How do you go about keeping characteristics of your design style while finding unique aspects in each and every one of your structures? And why has that been so successful for you? So, like the use of accent colors in your buildings, and how do you keep that characteristic in your design style, but you go about finding uses, like how you go about finding unique use of that in each and every one of different projects that you do?
Okay.
Just to paraphrase, part of my question was the use of color, I think, is extremely ambitious and fearless. And
Okay.
I think in the American landscape, in the American architectural education, color many times is overlooked, or there's not an expertise, and so when it
Okay.
is used, it's not used with such thoughtfulness, especially in relationship to the natural light and how you're using it in that ways. And so I think some of the students are probably honing in on the fact that there was color, and color was used not only as a building system, well, it's engaging in the thickness of the wall, but it's also used as wayfinding. It's
Yeah. Okay.
specifically about placement.
Yeah, like
How do you use that?
The placement of engaging with the color. Okay, you go for that. Yeah. No, it should be only one of us, otherwise we're going to be here.
One of the things that we used to joke in the office is that when Le Corbusier was building La Tourette, he used to say to the Dominicans that the only luxury you can afford, the only luxurious material you can afford is color. So we were bugged by, I mean, we've always played with color, as you rightly pointed out, in either wayfinding or to characterize different spaces. So for instance, we didn't show any image of the theater, but all the fire stairs in the theater are red, right? So if there's a fire, you open the door and say, my God, what's happening? Am I going in or not? You know.
Let's tell the story.
And so there's let's say a little bit of self-evident humor here, but also to provide for a sense of expectation. So, for instance, in the school, we have lots of orange and yellow to qualify places with a little bit more of warmth, and those places are meant for students to gather. So you see a lot of skylights or a lot of walls painted with this kind of bright burnt yellow that just gives a sense of more comfort, because there's light then becomes very different. And but also we worked with a color consultant that would always guide us through why green here and blue there and yellow and red and so on and so forth. So there are, for instance, the chimney is not a place where you stay because you just move through stairs, but has the same yellow color of other places where you would stay. But it's just a moment where it's almost like you're squeezing a little bit of juice out of the space, because you're traveling on a 8-foot floor-to-ceiling space for all these spaces, because the existing buildings didn't allow for any mechanical surfaces to be parts, so the ceilings are quite low. And then you have these moments where you open up to the light, and then the light is dramatized in yellow. We do enjoy working with color to identify different spaces. And we've used color in many different ways, but color is a very intriguing material, because it triggers orientation, warmth, comfort, and a sense of playfulness. And one of the things,
through the day.
Exactly. One of the things that I've noticed that you notice in the school, the wall, in the school, the window details, the wall reveal is aluminium as well. So just because the thickness of the wall is done with an aluminium, like an aluminium sheet, the way color bounces in between the wall spaces is very different. If that was just going to be a white plaster wall going against the window frame. So the way color reflects is also very, very intriguing. And this is something that we kind of thought it would happen, but when it happens in a much stronger way. And when you look at the reflection of color, we see brown and green and oranges when there's none, but it's just how the colors are being mixed. And we were very fortunate to work with a color consultant that has a device that will measure the percentage of any given color in any given color. So also then we have this kind of, let's say, very scientific work that is supporting our intuitions.
It's like the color, the red is a special kind of red, and is used on that wall because of the daylight and so on and so forth. So this could go...
Yeah, for instance, the classrooms, we just thought about a white. Usually we think about classrooms being white, and this person said, nope, there's only one white. It has to be a very dark white because of the way our pupil is functioning in terms of reading the contrast between what you write and what you draw in that wall. And we didn't want a white classroom. So that's why, for instance, when we looking at Alvar Aalto, the sanatorium in Paimio, where you have the patients in bed and the ceiling is yellow, although we don't envisage students kind of in horizontal position in classrooms so far. But we thought, okay, and the ceiling is acoustic, we have this acoustic material, what if we paint that acoustic material in kind of a warm yellow? So walls are white, the floors are red or gray, but the ceiling has this kind of warmth by being in this kind of burnt yellow. So it's trying to associate these different things that we kind of that we play with colors. One thing you mentioned about style, although we enjoy playing with materials, and I think that if materials have a clear presence, we hope people will appreciate the presence of those materials or how things are put together. we go through life in many distracted modes. We appreciate things through distraction mainly, but if things have a sense of clarity in their presence, maybe there's opportunities for us to pay attention in a different way. Today, we were walking with Peter in Cranbrook, and every now and then he would say, look at that stone, look at that detail, and Craig as well, the ballerina in one detail in one of the columns. So if what we do has that kind of love and intensity, maybe others will pay attention. We never focus on design style. We actually really don't know what that is. We're not interested in developing a language. We're interested in exploring possibilities. So, although there are things that are, I would say, they may seem consistent, but those have to do with what we are intrigued by, not how we want things to look like. That was another question.
Okay.
Tony, you had one. Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you.
My question goes back to the competitions. You said you typically take 1 month to start or to finalize boards, and I was curious about
To begin and end.
Yeah, but if you win, I'm curious how drastic the design changes, how much control you have over it, and
Can I answer that?
yeah.
Okay, that's good. Because, what people ask us is that most of the time we respond to one pieces of paper with the program. So after we win, the first thing we do is try to talk to the people that are going to use the buildings. If they are, Diogo already mentioned the teacher from that medical school, but all the others, the first thing we do is to talk to them. Now the clients, which is the public building, they don't like it a lot, but what we try to do is to understand what are the people needs, but being very careful with the budget. So sometimes it's really the location of the door. Sometimes it's really, can my office be on the other side because I have to control this? And those small things make people attached to the building. And we've been quite fortunate because the way that we connect with the people that are going to use the buildings, they really like the buildings, and so that's, for us, that's the most important thing, is how does people use the buildings. And we keep on going back, and people are telling us, we like this, we like that, oh, remember my door, thank you so much, and stories like that. So we try to do as much as possible the connection of the people that are going to use it, and also what we normally do is to bring small things that could be crucial, but yet the building does not be totally transformed. Such as, for example, if there is one opportunity of, because we see it on site, we find this archaeological possibility, we talk to the client and say, listen, this is a museum, maybe this is a way that you have to consider because we just find this and we were not aware. So these are conditions that, but we don't have a lot of flexibility to change the design through the construction package. So it's a tough thing.
I would say that being a registered architect, you are responsible for the design and for the building. The advantage of having a competition is someone else chose your project. That gives you a sense of confidence. It's like you date someone, your partner, before things get serious, let's say, right? And Martin, come on. We just met. I would arrange marriage. But the interesting thing is that obviously, for instance, the medical school that I've mentioned has had many changes. But if I show you what we had like 6 years ago, you would find it not easy to find the changes because it's incredible how resilient the strategies of the voids have proven. Everything is dancing, but the key element, which is the organizing voids, has not been changed. So we need to know what's important, what's crucial, and what can navigate through the changes. And knowing that we'll have months and months to develop the project with those who are in charge of either use the building or manage the building. Sometimes those who will manage those buildings have more serious questions because they are interested in maintenance costs, they are interested in how the building is going to age, and to bring on board those concerns, I would say it's our obligation. Because and I've seen or heard many stories of architects that once the building is open, they will never go back. We like to go back. I like to see you in 5 years, and I don't want to be insulted by you, right? I want to think that you're opening your bedroom door, your kitchen door every day, you're not cursing me. Right, you're finding things about the house that we've done for you, let's say, every day. So we are, and sometimes it's tough. You get a call 3 years later saying that something is not working, and so it's tough. But it's interesting to see that clients set up that kind of expectation from you, that you care for the process. Mm-hmm. So it's engagement, is listening, is responding, and knowing what's important, and obviously, controlling budgets. This is very, very nice, and they want to know if there's any change to the budget. Right.
Okay, I guess, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the great questions.
Yeah.